Hi, everybody, and welcome to our third pre-full moon keynote work. I want to say that I'm very grateful to Francis Donald for having stood in for me while Tuya and I were traveling back from the United States post-conference, where we had a lot to do. I hope some of you were able to attend the conference one way or another, either by your presence or by your presence with our broadcasts. And, you know, I realize we may have had a little trouble with some of the broadcasts, but we are working hard to get those programs ready for you so you'll be able to appreciate them at any time during the year. It was a wonderful conference. It was our 30th, and, you know, in the Alice Bailey tradition, there's that tradition of 30 years' work. But at the University of the Seven Rays and the Seven Ray Institute, we intend to keep going with our work. The next 9 years are of vital importance. A number of groups have looked at the year 2025, when the great conclave is again to occur, the centennial conclave of the hierarchy. And further than that, the Tibetan has said that at least in the area of astrology and probably in other things, he will begin his third installment. I think he says after the year 2025, but let's see if it includes that. I hope there are not too many people with the pen in hand ready to take down the dictation of the Tibetan. Whoever it is will be an initiate of some status, and perhaps the work will proceed along the first ray line. There's a lot of that in the Tibetan. He says that he has within his spiritual triad the energies of the first ray, and that's a tremendous hint for those who understand something of the rayology of the situation. Well, anyway, forthcomingly, we will be having our pre-full moon webinar tomorrow evening at the same time, and then on the next day, well, is it really the next day? I think it is. Tuya, my wife, will be giving the broadcast of the full moon. I should be seeing it here. I think it is in the chat box. So to some people, I mistakenly wrote that the full moon was at 9:44, but it's actually 9:14 and 21 seconds p.m. GMT on that Saturday. So here in Finland, we begin on the 22nd, not the 21st. Mercury is still retrograde, so if I garble my words, please excuse me. I don't know what kind of Mercury retrograde period you have had, but everything I've planned has somehow changed in the process. So anyway, Tuya will be offering that starting at 7:44 GMT, and then an hour and a half after that, the full moon will occur. And you know, this full moon in Gemini is so very, very rich. You may remember from the labors of Hercules in Gemini how Hercules actually had 5 labors when dealing with the sign Gemini. He had to listen to the voice of intuition. He failed on that. He had to overcome glamour in the form of Antaeus, which he somewhat succeeded. He had to, what can I say, he had to see through the false teacher Busiris, and probably he spent a lifetime or more chained to the altar, and he finally chained Busiris to his own altar. Then he had to help Prometheus, which is the solar angels, and then finally he had to help Atlas, who is the planetary logos, and then the golden apples of the Hesperides, which he had been seeking, the apples of knowledge and wisdom, just rolled into his hand, you know. So there's so much to learn in Gemini and so much in esoteric astrology, which is far beyond what normal astrology says of this sign. Anyway, it's a sign associated with the head of the cosmic Christ, and deeply associated with our present Christ, the Lord Maitreya, who is undergoing the 7th initiation, we are told, and it seems to take a long time, you know, or perhaps it might even take close to 4,000 years to undergo some of those later initiations, at least this one. as he began it back in Palestinian days, and then is still continuing, and probably until the end of the age of Aquarius, or very nearly that, he will take that along with the Buddha. So it's a very important sign for him, and he's made certain great inroads, you might say, into the full initiation. One of them was in 1943, I guess. The Tibetans said a great peak of the love energy was established or experienced by the Christ, and after that he was able to give out the great invocation. So it's an amazing sign, and Tuya and I will talk more about it, and maybe Francis has talked about it somewhat too in the two presentations he's made. But for now, we're continuing, and our theme is contact. The first 2 days that you worked here, the theme was love, and then also, the theme was love, and then resurrection. And it's very interesting because the sign Gemini is really associated with that seventh initiation and with resurrection, which is the theme of the seventh initiation. Now, we're not going to experience it in that way, of course, but we can certainly rise out of our present limitations of consciousness and still deal with the arena in which the consciousness was limited. We're not, up and away and far away from all that, but we have to learn how to rise above and be in the world and yet not of it, and how to pervade our entire universe with a fragment of ourselves. We have to learn that, and how to recognize our other self, and in the waning of that self to grow and glow. So it's a dual kind of consciousness revealing a profound unity. Okay, so let's go on with our work together. And we're dealing with the specific Gemini keynote of contact, and we'll go deeply into meditation on that contact, and we'll see where we are. So good to see quite a number of you here. Welcome you all to, I won't, call out your names, but there you are, and I see who you are here, and I'm very happy to be working with you at this time. All right, so we begin. We withdraw our consciousness from the personality and its vehicles. This is often a rather habitual state of consciousness, physical, emotional, mental. We pull back. It's the stage of pratyahara in the Yoga Sutras. And as we pull back, we recognize that we have or are possessed of these spheres of energy, but we do not at this time identify as them. Later we will, but for now we discriminate and pull back from these fields. So, not the etheric physical, and not the emotions, and not the contents of the lower mind, but instead we recognize ourselves as the soul, the consciousness, the unit of consciousness in incarnation. We are a unit of being and consciousness, being consciousness. The observer we are. And that observer one day is not only the soul in incarnation, it's the entire monad. But, that day will come for all of us at some point. So we are the observer of the personality vehicles, and as they fade out in our consciousness, we establish ourselves within the field of light, love, and spiritual sacrificial power. It's just a change of focus, really. We can use the imagination to do it. let one thing fade out and another thing fade in. And that light, that area of light and love and power is always present, however much our personality, consciousness seems to block it at times. So it's as if we are within the causal body, as if we are consciously within the egoic lotus, with all of its potencies, as a more true home, a more true home of our consciousness. And our consciousness begins to be what it should be, that of the soul, and we merge ourselves. The soul is group conscious, and we merge ourselves into a deep sense of the group soul. All of us, and all the members of the New Group of World Servers and the men and women of Goodwill, and finally everybody, in the body, out of the body. If you're a human being, the soul consciousness is there, one way or another, whether it is the consciousness of within the causal body or the consciousness within the spiritual triad, which is in a way, a more true type of ego or soul. Soul consciousness is there. And we're united with all these spiritually minded people, and ultimately with everyone. There is the one soul of humanity, the one consciousness. It's like Argus with 10,000 eyes, but really billions of eyes. And there's one consciousness peering out of all those eyes, all those aspects of the sensory apparatus, whether on the physical or on other planes. It's just one soul, one observer, one experiencer, and there is no, ultimately, no my soul and thy soul. That kind of personal discrimination is gone. It's hard to overcome, but it can be overcome. And finally, we realize the profound second ray mantram, naught is but me, the greater I, the greater me. Naught is. Naught is. But this everywhere found me. Harmlessness is the condition of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere, whose nature is love, whose method is inclusiveness, and for whom all forms are alike in that they veil and hide the light and are but externalizations of the one infinite being. So says the Tibetan in a fantastically profound description of what harmlessness is, the life expression of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere. We have a group mental unit. We can think together. The will aspect of the soul enters and energizes that mental unit to help us build the Antakarana. So when we think we are energized by the will to initiate, to unify, to evolve, to harmonize, to act, to cause, and to express the 7 ray aspects of the will. And as we think together, we will reach into the higher spaces together. We will imagine that each of us has this lighted rainbow bridge. The group has all 7 colors, but each one of us has 2 particularly. The color of our soul ray and the color of our personality ray, and you can see on the screen which is which. But indigo is the main color for us because it's the soul ray of our planetary logos. It is the soul ray of our solar logos, the great heart of love. Indigo is the color for us, whatever our other rays may be. So visualize then your dual-colored rainbow bridge. Of course, it's in the imagination, but the occult realities may be quite different, but imagination does serve. And so it seems to rise from the mental unit into what we visualize as the spiritual triad, through the monastic permanent atom, through the Buddhic permanent atom and its developing vehicle, through the atomic permanent atom and its yet-to-be-developed vehicle, and finally into what for us is the center of pure being. It is the monad itself. It rises. The main hue is indigo, but within that our particular soul and personality ray are to be found. And if we don't really know what those are, then we just use indigo. And the group has a 7-fold bridge. All the colors are there, the main colors. We can visualize that like a cone. The cone is a very interesting formation. It's really, the wizard's hat rising into the point of pure being. Or if we wish, we can see the monad as the center of a sphere, whichever way. And across that many-colored rainbow bridge, and specifically across the 2-colored bridge that we have visualized, we will project a line of living light, as if energizing all the aspects of the triad and even anchoring itself in the point of pure being. So the way we'll do this is inwardly we will use the 2nd ray, word of power. I see the greatest light, while we outwardly, on one of the 2nd ray notes, the G, will sound the Om 3 times. Outwardly the G, the Om. Inwardly, I see the greatest light. So we have built through visualization a kind of group antikarana which should help us be sensitive to higher impression and even to the impression of the One through the monad. We're all different, but we're all the same, and that's the great paradox to resolve. I see the greatest light, it descends from the higher aspects of our being. So, in the presence of the spiritual triad and of the center of pure being, we try to feel the presence of the Great White Brotherhood, the Lodge of Masters, the spiritual hierarchy of our planet. It will grow in power, that felt presence, as the full moon approaches. We try to be together at such a point of tension that we can begin to feel their presence. Images may come, but of course, you know, the Buddhic plane where they reside is not a plane of images. It is a plane which can stimulate image on the astral plane, but, you know, we have to be careful. We don't get caught in the lower images which are not related to the Buddhi. So, with heartfelt gratitude, we offer our salutations to the Masters and to the head of the hierarchy, the Christ, and also to the Buddha, who is involved in this Gemini festival. The two brothers, one of the East, one of the West, the Buddha, the Christ, exemplifying for us the theme of brotherhood and the union of the hemispheres, are deeply involved in this particular presentation of reality we call the Festival of the Christ, Festival of Humanity, the Asala Festival. So, at a point of tension, open to the higher impression, all together, and united in thought with all of humanity, we offer our salutations, our solidarity with the great helpers from the higher spheres, in a way pledging ourselves to stand with their intentions and to be conduits for the working out of their spiritual intentions. You can sound this, you know, where you are, in your home. Sound along with me. Om. Salutations to the Buddha, the Lord of Light and Wisdom. Salutations to the Christ, the Master of all the Masters, the teacher alike of angels and of men. Salutations to the Triangle of Masters with whom we most closely work, those who have made a special effort to bring the ageless wisdom to humanity during these past 2 centuries. Salutations to the Master Morya, the head of all esoteric schools and organizations. Salutations to the Master Kutumi, whose ashram is most responsible in the work of preparing men's minds and hearts for the reappearance of the Christ, the present Christ, the Lord Maitreya. Salutations to the Master Jwal Kul, the present messenger of the hierarchy, authorized to give 3 installments of the ageless wisdom which can be trusted. Salutations to your own Master, as you may know him to be or conceive him to be, and to the entire spiritual hierarchy of our planet. We raise our thoughts imaginatively and as a group toward Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. However inscrutable that will may be to beings such as we presently are, but in reverence and humility, and together, identified as a group soul, we attempt to attune with the presence of Sanat Kumara, standing at the center of Shambhala. And if this succeeds, we will really know something of what the spiritual will is. And so inwardly we sound a long, silent Om, and we imagine the group and all servers and men and women of goodwill imbued with the energy of the King of Shambhala, that extension of the planetary logos we call Sanat Kumara, a long, silent, internal Om. So we have offered our salutations. We have created, in imagination at least, a kind of bridge of light through which the higher impression can ascend. We have aligned in imagination with the will and purpose, as much of it as we can receive, of Sanat Kumara. And we now extend our thought toward the constellation Gemini. You've probably seen it. Two prominent stars. One of them is actually six-fold. Castor is three doubles, and Pollux a supergiant. And the constellation is kind of a oblong square, and that will mean something to people who are Masonically trained. We raise our consciousness towards Gemini, towards Mercury, carrying the messages from on high with speed and light, uniting the pairs of opposites, towards Venus, magnetically and in love, merging the pairs of opposites. And here we are on our Earth, which is, interestingly, the hierarchical ruler of Gemini, and it is the field of service for us. Gemini has so much to do with the redemption of our planet. We're all within the field of great love. Whatever our rays may be, whatever our status may be, it is the solar logos in which our monad finds its home, that which finds its home within the sun. A great field of solar systemic love, of a kind that Earth is trying to learn, kind of light is coming forth from Gemini, the light of interplay, as the Tibetan describes it. This is a line of light beams, revealing that which opposes, or the basic duality of manifestation and the relationship of spirit and of form, the conscious light of that relationship. Spirit and form, spirit and matter form. And we here in Earth School learn how to be adjudicators between the pairs of opposites, matter, spirit, personality, soul. We learn the difference, often the hard way. So this Gemini energy is getting stronger and stronger. These days, we're just not too far from the full moon, 2 days away. The forces of reconstruction are growing. That's the Gemini forces, the rebuilding of human civilization and the planet, which the forces of restoration and the forces of enlightenment have revealed what to do. We are rebuilding according to the plan. And you know the second ray is the great building ray. All the rays have their building aspect, of course. Second ray is prominent, seventh ray prominent. First ray on its Vulcan aspect prominent. Rebuilding that which has gone astray from the plan. The forces of enlightenment reveal the disparity between conditions and archetype. There is an archetype, and conditions are what they are, and conditions have to be modeled after a better and more beautiful inner design. forces of reconstruction, and may we all be involved in those Geminian forces. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. I, in my soul aspect, grow and glow as the dominance, the ancient authority of the personality, and it's a big authority for many years. It subsides, and the authority is our soul, what we are as a soul. It's a wonderful energy, and the high point of love for a certain cycle was reached in 1943 with the Christ taking a very important aspect of the seventh initiation. And we can participate in that if we just put all the personality commotion aside and become transparent. To the higher energies with which we are more identified now. The Christ and the Buddha. They are the two brothers of the West and the East, respectively. And they are, for us, the exemplars of the Geminian energy. Perfect cooperation between the opposites and between the hemispheres they represent. Of course, it has yet to materialize in our kind of world, but it's on its way. The spiritual union of all opposites. Whatever opposes, we can unite. And actually, that's what Gemini does in most cases. It unites the opposing zodiacal signs. So if those constellations, those signs can be united, so can the apparent opposites in our life be united too. And especially soul and personality, where all of us, we have our issues, don't we? And where Gemini and Sagittarius are concerned, then Pisces does the uniting. How interesting then that Master K.A. should be so represented by two signs, Gemini and Pisces. So the brothers in the light, the Christ and the Buddha and the Christ, the great invocation was given out shortly after the Christ achieved that high point in 1943, and then in 45 it was given out with his great sacrifice to reappear in physical form for the Aquarian Age. So on the full moon itself, the Christ, the Tibetan tells us, preaches the last sermon of the Buddha before the assembled hierarchy and before the hearts and minds of all human beings. So we can get something of the idea of that wonderful sermon. You know, it emphasizes above all self-reliance. Self-reliance, the real self within you. That's what to rely upon. That is eventually the one self. Let no teacher get in the way of your contact with that real self. And today, of course, our work is with contact. And so, a translation of a section of that last sermon relevant to today. And so also, says the Buddha, when the disciple, he, thinks or reasons or feels, let him so regard his thought that being strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful, he may, whilst in the world, overcome the grief which arises from the craving due to ideas, or to reasoning, or to feeling. All this whilst in the world. The Buddha came compassionately to help end the grief of nescience holding humanity in slavery, and that means ignorance, the greatest of all sins. To end the grip of ignorance, nescience. And so, affirm in your deeper self the fact that you, I, we, can be strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful in the overcoming of the grief which arises from the craving due to ideas, or to reasoning, or to feeling, and let us resolve to be so. Strenuous, thoughtful, and mindful. According to the Buddha's doctrine of self-reliance, we work out our own salvation. But of course, it's we as the soul, right? Inspiring the personality. So it becomes the soul-infused personality working out its own salvation, relying on no one but the real self. If we could just realize who we are and what we are, a whole new strength would enter the disciples, the aspirants, those who reach for greater things. And relying upon ourselves, upon the immortal God within which we are, then we could really help with greater power and restore the self unto the self, restore the self in those who do not know it exists and who rely upon others instead of upon the inner God which they are. Strenuous. The Buddha had a first-rate personality, we are told, and is directly connected to Shambhala. Thoughtful and mindful, illumined mind. think of the last sermon of the Buddha, a new confidence should enter our entire psycho-spiritual approach. And that confidence should be contagious and inspire others. So with profound gratitude for all the Buddha has done to illumine humanity as the Lord of Light and the Lord of Wisdom, we refocus our attention upon the Christ. Each has to see or visualize the Christ in his own way, the Tibetan tells us. And with utmost heartfelt attentiveness, we listen inwardly, imagining that we hear the Christ sounding the great invocation, and we allow a period for the silent absorption of his imagined sounding. So on each of these 3 days of preparation prior to the full moon, the Christ is said to speak the great invocation alone. So we inwardly listen as if he is speaking. And again, listening inwardly with great care, we imagine the Christ and the entire hierarchy intoning the third stanza of the great invocation, having to do with the will. You know it, but here it is on the screen. The Christ and the entire hierarchy. Contemplating the deep significance of these words, as if the entire hierarchy speaks them. What an invoking body it must be, with all that authority of true accomplishment, calling out to the highest center, calling out to Shambhala. For the spiritual will, at last, to imbue those who can receive it, and in some measure all human beings who will learn to stand with massed intent one day under Vulcan, massed intent for the good. And let each one of us resolve that we will be part of that intent to bring the will to good through goodwill to whomever we can touch, and eventually to all human beings. What a battle it is, what a battle it will be. And Master DK said at night, Second Ray Master, he said, see that you battle. Vulcan, overcoming Mars. So this is the third day before the full moon. We are considering it that way. We joined Christ, the spiritual hierarchy, the Buddha. We contemplate together the third keynote. We've contemplated love, resurrection, and now the keynote of contact. We contemplate that together. The keynote of contact, of a closer relation between Christ and his people, between hierarchy and humanity. Very simply stated, but what does it mean to us? A closer relation between Christ and his people, between the hierarchy and humanity. Hierarchy is friendship in its truest sense. Master DK tells us, let humanity, through contact, experience the quality of that friendship. And let it be with the real Christ and the real hierarchy that we have contact. It's not easy to discriminate, but if the quality of love and pure reason, harmony, beauty, if those qualities are present, then we will not become confused with the reflection of the hierarchy. The heart has to be open. The soul has to be infusing the personality. The antakarana must be somewhat built. And remember how Mercury and Gemini contribute to the building of that antakarana. Then maybe we will have contact with the real thing. And that will make of us really useful servers. So vitally necessary during the next 9 years when humanity will be going through so much. So we envision then we and all human beings will come into ever closer relation with the Christ and his hierarchy. And we imagine that what the reality of this contact will bring in terms of the expression of the will to good upon our planet. We know there is so much selfishness. One doesn't even see it when one is experiencing it. It just seems so natural. But all that has to end if the will to good through goodwill is really to take over. So we open ourselves to impression, from the Buddhic levels at least, and attempt to feel deeply, as if this contact were already a fact on the planes of the soul and spiritual triad. They are. The contact is a fact on those planes. If we can rise to those planes, we will have the contact. It really does require the heart center and the heart and the head center, and the alignment with the love petals and sacrifice petals of the egoic lotus. The contact can be real. But always we must be discriminative, because just because we see something inwardly, that in itself is not the guarantee that it is real. It may be actual in our consciousness, but not necessarily real. So let us be strict with ourselves, so the real thing can come through. During this next day, we think of contact, we cultivate contact, we leave our heart center as open as it may be, and the heart and the head as responsive as possible. and the will to good very strong in our thought, so that contact can be real. And not just now and then, but ongoingly real. So we affirm our solidarity with the Buddha and the Christ and the assembled hierarchy. And in our imagination we merge with them at this time of growing importance during the higher interlude of the year. We imaginatively merge with them as they bless the world in silence. If enough of us manage to know what it really means to bless the world together, something very positive can happen. So we pause then for a moment of appreciation for the illumined, loving energies of the constellation Gemini, and we feel ourselves imbued with these energies as they are growing in strength as the full moon approaches. We're 2 days away. That's the idea, to absorb the energies of the moment, of the time, and have them expressed through us in a positive way. That's what we do. So, as if in union with the Christ, the hierarchy, the Buddha, and all the disciples in the world, we will sound together the third stanza of the great invocation. Even though, you'll be in your own home or wherever you're doing this meditation, sounding it aloud, and we won't hear each other, but we're sounding it together, nevertheless. And we're sensing that it is the will of God that Shambhala, the Christ, hierarchy, humanity, all of these may come into true and real contact, and that we may thereby cooperate along with all the higher cooperators in the redemption of our planet. So, from the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men. The purpose which the masters know and serve. So let us then strive to establish right contact. And when the contact is made, it will not speak of things personal, it will speak of the divine plan and how we can participate in our own sphere in bringing that divine plan to Earth, to the dense physical plane, where so much remains to be done. So I want to thank you all for your participation today. Keep your alignment, your point of tension. Let the contact be added to love and resurrection. And tomorrow night, well, night here anyway, at the same time we'll do our entire pre-full moon webinar, and then on the 21st, beginning at 7:44 p.m. GMT, Tuya will offer the broadcast with music and image for the exact full moon moment, which will be GMT at 9:44 and 21 seconds, the exact moment of the full moon. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you, and let these energies keep growing in their reality for us. Love, resurrection, contact. Looking forward to cooperating with you further in meditation as the days go by here. Okay, lots of love, and we'll be together, inevitably, working together, and all the best to everyone. Bye-bye.